In our top story now, Nobel Laureate Toni Morrison has died. She was 88 years old. Morrison was an American novelist, essayist, editor, teacher and professor emeritus at Princeton University. She won the Pulitzer Prize and the American Book Award in 1988 for her novel Beloved. For more on her life, we're now joined by our correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease, who's in New York. Sherwin, thanks very much indeed for joining us. I guess the literary world and those that have enjoyed her work over decades are probably in shock at this time because a giant has fallen.
Yeah, and we didn't really get a heads up about this, Peter. We understand that she died last night. We still don't know where in the United States that was. She was 88 years old, so clearly of certainly a long life. But as you correctly point out, the literary world will certainly be in mourning. People, you know, yourself and myself and older probably know her better than the millennials of our time. She was really known for chronicling and writing about the black experience in the United States. This was her legacy. In fact, Peter, you know, you refer to all the awards she got. Let me tell you, speak in her words, she gave an interview to the Paris Review in 1993, and let me just quote what she said in that interview. "I would like to write novels that were unmistakably mine, but nevertheless, first, into African American traditions, and second of all, this whole thing called literature. It's very important to me that my work be African American. If it assimilates into a different or larger pool, so much better." She was very proud of her legacy, and she was also very committed to passing on her knowledge and passing on her expertise. As you correctly point out, she was a lecturer for many years at Princeton University, so really passing on the craft to a younger generation. And I think it goes without saying that an icon in literature and certainly in American traditions has fallen today.
Wrote many books, and for those that know her work will know how important some of those works were. They were required reading for a lot of people in universities. But I guess a lot of us, because of the film, will remember Beloved, the film version that starred Whoopi Goldberg, a really important book, and that saw her getting a Nobel Prize soon after.
So the Nobel Prize in 1993, Beloved, of course, featuring Oprah Winfrey and the likes of Danny Glover. And that really did make a name for herself, I think, in the literary world. Some other of her well-known books are A Song of Solomon and A Mercy. A Mercy was a book that, my understanding, dealt a lot with slavery in the United States and Jim Crow. And so writing that, I imagine, really touched the soul of so many people in this country. She also, Peter, in 2012 received the highest civilian honor awarded to any American citizen from the former President Barack Obama. And I just want to read the citation that Obama read himself before he presented the medal to her. Quote, "Toni Morrison, she's used to a little distraction. As a single mother working at a publishing company by day, she would carve out a little time in the evening to write, often with her two sons pulling on her hair and tugging at her earrings. Once a baby split up on her tablet, so she wrote around it, laughter. Circumstances may not have been ideal, but the words that came out were magical. Toni Morrison's prose brings us that kind of moral and emotional intensity that few writers ever attempt. From Song of Solomon to Beloved, Toni reaches us deeply, using a tone that is lyrical, precise, distinct, and inclusive. She believes that language arcs towards the place where meaning might lie. The rest of us are lucky to be following along for the ride." I don't think I could have encapsulated that better than the former president of the United States.
Wow. And I guess it's probably soon after hearing the news that reaction probably is only starting to filter through now.
Well, President Obama tends to be very slow with his reaction on Twitter these days. His statement also on the mass shootings in the United States came quite late after that. So he tends to be quite thoughtful about how he'll respond. We also expect to hear from the office of the former President Bill Clinton and Secretary of State, and even possibly from President Donald Trump. Of course, dealing with a lot of racial division in this country. This is something that Toni Morrison, his legacy will will be remembered for trying to really take issues of division and divisiveness, dating back to issues of slavery and the history of, and really coming to grips with the history of this country. So it's an interesting time that her passing comes as Americans are again dealing with very deep-seated divisions in this country. So it will be interesting to hear from the former presidents. I'm sure Oprah Winfrey, many people who played roles in her books that were adapted into film will weigh in. But let's see who will be first. No bets on who will react first, Peter.
All right, and that's where we're going to leave it. Thank you very much indeed, Sherwin Bryce-Pease, our correspondent in the United States, speaking to us about the passing of literary giant Toni Morrison. And just to give you a little bit more about just how remarkable her work was, she, in fact, in 1972 was the first black woman editor at world-renowned Random House, an editor for fiction. And she was responsible to bring a lot of African writers to the fore. And at that time, there was a book called Contemporary African Literature, and that saw the work of Wole Soyinka, Chinua Achebe, and our very own Athol Fugard actually coming to the fore. So she did a lot of work in bringing black literature to a prominence in America. Having lived through very difficult times in America's history, being 88, she lived through very many things in her time. And so she wrote a number of books which expressed and talked about American history. Her own father, when she was very young, saw a person get lynched by white people. So a lot of her, in fact, her first play was based, I guess, on some of her experiences. So a number of books that she's written over time: Beloved, Jazz, Paradise, The Bluest Eye, the very first one, which got critical acclaim, but perhaps not sold as well as it should have. More on that, I'm sure, during the course of our programs, during the course of this evening. Valesa?